Okay, this car blew a head gasket. Water is going into the radiator. First thing that I do is take the hood off. There's 4 12 millimeters. Take those off, get the hood out of the way, gives you room to work. More light. I just prefer it. You don't have to do it, but I prefer it. Second thing you want to do is rotate the crankshaft. Put a 19 millimeter on a socket. See, you got a flat top socket in there, just kind of tight. Rotate the engine around until the number 1 cylinder is at the power stroke. So, okay, I got that little ratchet in there. Rotating to the time mark comes around. There's a mark there. There it is. Mark. Wind up on 0. I just take a hose and I hold it over the spark plug hole and blow on it. If I can't blow air in, I know it's on top dead center on the power stroke. If not, then I rotate that all the way around one more time. Okay, next step is to remove this, 2 10 millimeters. Pop this off, then reach underneath, disconnect the hose. Pop this out of here. It'll come off. That's the hose that attaches underneath the air filter. You gotta make sure you get that reattached later on. Okay, next thing you want to do, I think I'm going to pull the distributor out. Take this 12 millimeter bolt out, disconnect the 2 vacuum lines, and it'll pull right out. You also want to disconnect this plug before you can pull the distributor out. The rubber, there's a rubber O-ring right there. Replace it if it's hard and brittle. The next thing would be disconnect that plug, thermostat. Move this wire out of the way. I want to get this cover off. There's 10 millimeters, 2 top, 2 middle, 2 on the bottom. It's easier to get at that bottom one if you remove this water pump pulley. So there's 3 10 millimeters on that. I'll get those off and then take this cover off. Okay, I got the water pump pulley off. I had to loosen up the alternator. Move it a little bit. Right now you want to, probably should have done this first, but you want to get the water drained out of the radiator. Loosen the plug down there on the bottom. Drain it out into a bucket. And then on this side, right here, there's a 12 millimeter. I'm going to loosen that up and drain the water out of the block. Okay, I got this thing free. I took the bolt off the alternator to separate it. We'll use this as a handle to help lift that thing off. Now I got to get that 14 millimeter bolt off and pull the pulley off with the belt. Okay, we're going to do this bolt, but first you want to loosen this 14 millimeter on the tensioner down here, the belt tensioner. Loosen up the I can pry this over a little bit and then tighten down the nut so that, or bolt. I push this over, tighten down the bolt, that way this belt will be loose. I can slide this off easier. And now you want to separate the hose from the Pcv valve. I usually use a big flat screwdriver and kind of twist and pry it. You don't want to break this, sometimes they're kind of brittle. Anyway, get that off and bent out of the way, or pushed out of the way I should say. I'll take a pair of pliers and squeeze these clamps. If this is the style you have, you want to get this hose off of here. Pry that hose off, and then there's a 12 millimeter on top here. I want to take and disconnect this. If you're worried about damaging your TVSV, if this just gets bumped, it'll break. You might want to consider carefully removing all the hoses and then removing it. Before you remove it, use a 17 millimeter deep on this and pull this off. That way you can get at this with a 19 millimeter wrench and get it off. But basically from here out we need to pull the carburetor. to get out the manifold. So I'm going to disconnect the fuel line next, and then disconnect the brake vacuum line, get those things out of here. Okay, I'm going to take this apart. I'm going to remove some of these vac lines. So I recommend you mark them with paint. You can see where I've marked these over the years, but I've got it down so well I pretty much know where they all go without having to mark them anymore. It's a good idea to either mark them with paint or some different colored tape or something. Tape them, put numbers on them. I didn't have to remove this, could have left it there, but I decided to remove it, so I'm going to check the O-rings on that tube. That tube will pull out of there. There's an O-ring on each end. Okay, everything's disconnected from the carburetor, vacuum lines, throttle cable. Take a 6-inch long 3/8 extension, 12mm socket, and I put a little bit of non-hardening gasket compound. When I stick it down in there to get the, you see down there's a socket on that one. You get these nuts off, the nuts won't stay down there, they'll stay in the socket. I remove the 2 nuts, just kind of lift this up, kind of hold it out of the way while you're pulling the carburetor up. It'll come right out of there. The next thing I'm going to remove is the fuel pump, because I got to disconnect this hose that goes to the back of the head. It's easier to get at it with the fuel pump off. So I disconnect these 2 hoses, I'll disconnect this cable just to get out of the way. Then after that we want to remove this and this. Usually remove this first, 2 12mm, and then use a wrench to get this off. That way you can get at this manifold bolt easier. We'll have to pull this thing off and pull this shield off, and then we can get at the bolt that's behind here for the manifold. Usually use a short 3/8 extension on a long 12mm or 12mm socket, deep dish with a 4-inch extension. Get that fuel pump out of there. Okay, fuel pump's coming out. Probably have to make my own gaskets to replace these, or just use some non-hardening gasket compound. Now we can get at this, get it disconnected. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. Move this vacuum thing so that way we can get at that bolt. There's a bolt right here, it has to come out. And pull that out. Alright, we're gonna pull this thing off. Get it out of there. It's connected by a plug down there. I'm just gonna set it off to the side for now. Alright, we're getting close to be able to get at that manifold. And the next thing I want to do is get the manifold off. There's these 14mm. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 10 of them. And the way to get them is an extension up through here to get the bottom ones, underneath here to get it. It goes all the way into here, and then the rest of them aren't too bad to get at. But the first thing it has to do is down here, you have to access it from underneath here. There's a 12mm bolt that holds a bracket that comes off the bottom of the exhaust manifold and attaches to the side of the block. Got to get that 12mm off. I usually just take a 3/8 ratchet with a kind of a long 6-inch extension, and I feel around under there. I can usually find it just by touchy-feely. It's just a short little 12mm bolt, but you got to get that off, otherwise you can't pull this away from the head. Okay, I went over the top of the oxygen sensor, and you can look down there. You might not be able to see it here, but not enough light, but you can look down there and you can actually see the socket on the bolt. But with a flashlight you can line it up and get it on there. And there it is. Okay, I started cracking all these. There's 2 14s right here, right next to each other. 2 up here, 1 here, 2 here, 2 underneath here. And there's 1 underneath here, 1 underneath here. Here you can see how I slipped it in underneath the intake manifold. There's a socket under there. There's one on the other side too. Okay, all the bolts are off for the manifold. That means this will come out. Don't forget to hook this back up when you put it back together. That's your ground strap. Keep electrolysis from happening on your head. Now, you can't pull it away from the engine until you go down there. There's a clamp on the side of the transmission. You got to loosen that clamp and free it, and then this will pull away from the head. Okay, I'm going to jack up the car so I can get underneath there and remove that clamp alongside the transmission so I can free up the exhaust pipe to push this over. Then we can pull the head off. So far I've been working on this for exactly 1 hour. I like to play it safe. Jack up the car on both sides, put blocks on the tires. That way this whole thing will be elevated. It's easier on the back when I go to reinstall everything. Usually it takes two 12mm to get it, and a piece of cardboard, nice to lay on. Here's the clamp right there. Okay, you can see I got it pulled away from the head. Now I can start doing the head. There's part of the gasket that was in there. You always have to replace that gasket. You usually tie a rope on this to pull it away from the head. Now you take those three off, pull the cap off. You can see how the water's gotten in the oil, so I'm going to need an oil change. It's brown instead of black. And I take a small siphoning hose and I siphon out all this oil very carefully. I have a clear hose so I can watch it go up the hose a little bit, and I blow it into a can, and then we can remove the head bolts. Now this one's a little hard to get at because there's this flat spot right here on the cam. Now on some cams it's wider than this one. I can get a small socket in there, but I did one car where this was too wide and I couldn't get any kind of socket in there. I ended up having to pull the rockers and everything off. But on this one we won't have to do that, I'm pretty sure. We can leave the rockers intact, leave the camshaft in. We just need to get the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 head bolts off. First I got to get rid of that oil. Start off with a big hose. See, I only sucked it up that far, and then I blow it into this container and see all that oil. The reason I do this, it keeps all this oil from running down into the engine block after I pull the head. It's just a cleaner way of doing it. Now I'm going to switch over to smaller diameter hose to get the nooks and crannies. Now you want to loosen the head bolts 3 stages or 2 stages, but you start here, you go to this one, 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 this one. Kind of go in that order. It's the reverse of the installation order. So you crack them. I'm going to crack them a 1/4 turn every one with a big breaker bar, and then do another 1/4 turn, and then I should be able to take them off. It was a little tight getting that one in there. I had to rotate the crank or the cam, so I put this 14mm in so I could turn it. So you can see there's just a slight little angle on that flat surface there. And I cracked them all not even a 1/4 turn, and they were loose, so kind of surprised at that. Magnet on a stick makes the life a lot easier getting some of the stuff out. There's also a washer down there you got to get out. Okay, all the head bolts are out. It's ready to come off, so I'll just grab it and wiggle it. It should come off, but if it doesn't, I'll just kind of wrap it, or pry up real hard on that thing. Yeah, use that as a lever and pull it straight up and get it out of there. And it will be, well, it's been an hour and a half, but if you knock off the time I take for all these little camera things, probably do a little quicker than that. Okay, the head is off. See, the pistons all look wet. There's water sitting on top of that one. And here's the head. I plan on using a genuine Toyota head gasket when I put this back together. I'm not sure what this one was. But I usually like to buy head gaskets where this area here covers the full width of the metal. I found that if you use Felpros, the metal distance here is about 3/8 of an inch, but the Felpros are only 3/16. It's only half. It only covers half of the area. So I try to order gaskets that do the full thing so I don't get blown between cylinders. This one obviously was a water issue, probably because I overheated due to that hose leaking. And then I thought I had it fixed, and then the bottom hose was leaking. So this car had sat for a little over a year before I started driving it again. That might have had something to do with it, I don't know, or maybe I just forgot to tighten that years before. I have no idea. Anyway, we'll pry that old head gasket off and clean off the block and clean up the head, get a new head gasket to put on it, and put it all back together basically in the reverse order. The only thing I'd recommend is that you have your torque wrench checked before you do it. I'm gonna check mine, make sure that it's accurate. I think it's 38 foot-pounds required, and there's a method for doing it using clamping everything in your vise and filling a water jug with a known weight of water. Anyway, it's kind of complicated, but I'm definitely going to check mine again before I do this, because those head bolts didn't seem like they were very tight. In between changes, when I'm cleaning these, I like to keep it stored upside down, preferably for a day or two, to let all the oil drain out. That way when you go to put it on, you don't have to worry about a drop of oil falling on your new head gasket and ruining the seal capabilities. I like to let them drain out. You can see that stuff dripping out of there. And of course, getting into checking the valves and all that, that's a whole different ball game I'm not going to cover here. Main idea on this video is just to show you how to get the thing out. Now there is a way of removing the head where you leave everything attached to the head. Like you leave the manifold attached, you disconnect it down here where the pipe starts, and you leave the distributor on, you leave the fuel pump on, pretty much leave everything on, you pull the whole works off. Now I've done it that way. It's kind of hard to get it all out of there yourself because it's pretty heavy with all that attached to it, and it's also more difficult getting it back on if you're by yourself. You should have help. But that method works fine. Just I wanted to do it this way this time. They both have advantages and disadvantages. This way, with nothing attached, I can pack this head around and test it and goof around with it, do whatever I want to it. And if I find I need to replace it, then it's already disconnected and I can just stick another head in there. I guess that's about it.